Power does what it wants. Power does what it wants. Power does what it wants.
Hey, so when are we ready? Thank you all for being here. My name is Scott Springer, New York City Controller, and I want to thank all of you for joining me. I'm joined by our General Counsel, Lisa Alcina, to my right, and our first Deputy General Counsel, Christina Rivera, to my left. We are here today to stand up for good government, to protect New Yorkers' hard-earned taxpayer money against waste, fraud, and abuse. In March of 2020, at the height of the pandemic, Mayor de Blasio signed Executive Order 101, allowed the city to buy and spend without transparency or oversight that is mandated in our city charter. The rationale at the time was that the city just didn't have time for accountability. And now, 15 months later, the city has entered into more than $6.9 billion in contracts without charter-mandated oversight. 15 months later, the city has entered into more than $6.9 billion, almost $7 billion in contracts without any charter-mandated oversight. And my office has examined some of these contracts, and the findings are alarming. Millions of dollars have been spent on supplies that never materialized, ventilators that were never delivered, $8 million for N95 masks that weren't actually N95 masks. They entered into a contract for $10 million last fall for quote-unquote emergency air conditioners that we wouldn't get until this summer. And even though Governor Cuomo has ended the New York State emergency, and even though the mayor himself has revoked many of the pandemic-related executive orders, the mayor has extended these procurement emergency powers more than 100 times, including as recently as last week, allowing the city to continue to spend without the oversight that my office is charter mandated to provide. People, this is unacceptable. And that's why today I am taking the city of New York to the state Supreme Court to affirm what we know to be true. The action of this executive order is a flagrant violation of the charter and an insult to the fundamentals of good government, and that's why we're going to court. We must reestablish the checks and balances to protect taxpayers. We're also taking legal action against the city to force them to turn over full documentation for the more than 1,500 contracts they self-register without transparency during the pandemic. This is critical for transparency and for the city's fiscal health. Part of our office's responsibility is to maintain the city's contract files. Without usable contract files, we won't have records of what procurement happened during the pandemic, not for the next controller, not for the next mayor, not for the press, and not for the public. We need to grant full contract files so we can maximize the city's federal grant reimbursement and get every dollar we deserve. That's why we need these files, because there's a federal component to this as well. Now, this court action, as many of you know, is something I don't take lightly. We have hit more and more pandemic recovery milestones. I have repeatedly urged the city to restore accountability. But after months of the city stonewalling, I am left with no other option. Enough is enough. As we work towards a strong post-pandemic recovery, the mayor cannot continue to enable unscrupulous spending, unvetted vendors, and misuse of taxpayer dollars. Now, many of you are as excited as I am that the Hometown Heroes Parade will go right by this very spot to honor the heroic efforts of our frontline workers who sacrificed so much for our city during the pandemic. Next month, the mayor is planning a massive homecoming concert in Central Park, headlined by Bruce Springsteen, Paul Simon, Jennifer Hudson. And it's going to celebrate the reopening and returning of our city's glory. I'm so relieved and overwhelmed with gratitude that New York is open this summer, and I know the mayor agrees with that. So we need to open back up the transparency and accountability that New Yorkers deserve. As we return to normal and face the end of this mayoral term, we can't let the mayor's hubris outlast the pandemic or even his mayoralty. Because this isn't about me or this mayor. This is about the next control and the next mayor and the kind of government they'll walk into on January 1st. We should not start off a new administration with such a steep imbalance of power. It's time to restore checks and balances, and it's time to restore good government. New Yorkers deserve trust in their government. It's time for the mayor to finally make this right. That is why we are in court today. The mayor could end this court case by owning up to transparency and good government, and that's why I'm here. That's why I'm joined by our two counsels. Any questions?
Yeah, do you think any of this was political? I mean, you're running for mayor, and the current mayor, do you have a sense that maybe he didn't want to give you any powers in terms of spending these checks and balances?
That would be more outrageous. But look, here's what we know. There's $6.9 billion in contracts that have never been vetted. There's 1,500 contracts outstanding. You got a $7 billion dollar amount, and then you have 1,500 contracts. What's in them? Who's reviewed them? This mayor does not have a great track record on transparency, spoil, and good governance. And I'll be damned if we're going to walk out on December 31st with $7 billion truly unaccounted for.
You'll have to remind me, and I was hoping you could just give me a report around this. There was one, I think, audit that you did on, it might have been the ventilators. How concerned are you that there are going to be like several unknown contracts? Can you talk a little bit more about the ones that you done the audit?
We raised a number of them today. In the window that we've been able to see, we do see problematic procurement. And that's because there's been no oversight. So we look at N95 masks that weren't N95 masks. We look at emergency air conditioners that are coming out last summer with this summer. And the reason we have checks and balances in every form of government, federal, state, and city, is so that there's always a check, especially when billions of dollars of money is going unaccounted. And that's why we're here today. This is not a place where I want to be. I want to be able to continue to do my work, not end up in Supreme Court, but we have to do this action. And that we filed it this morning. Our lawyers are on it because we have to straight away look at those $6.9 billion in spend and those 1,500 in contracts. You need to see it as members of the press. You can't cover this up by simply not, by considering an executive order that is clearly running short.
How has the mayor been able to stave you off this long and not sit down and hear your concerns about it?
Well, we have continued to come back time and time again to demand accountability. And, court action is the last resort. Common sense is the first resort. And we haven't seen that in this administration. So we are coming back today in a court action because we're going to get to the bottom of it.
But have you actually spoken to him and asked him to restore the actual
Yes. Yes, we sent him as much documentation that we could provide you. We've actually we sent him no less than 4 letters, and counsel, we can provide them. We'll provide that to you.
But have you personally spoken to him and asked him?
Look, I don't have to speak to him to ask him by letter to do the right thing, right?
No, you haven't.
I have spoken to him personally. But it's been a while.
Let me ask, sir, is there any way, once we get the audits of these contracts, is there any way to cancel them or recoup any of that money that's been needlessly spent?
I don't want to speculate on the contracts that I haven't seen.
Okay.
What's the precedent for how long we can wait to capture one of your documents?
Well, we're moving as quickly as possible, and hopefully we'll be able to see some conclusion. Nathan, you want to say anything?
And yes, we are going forward on July 27th.
That's 584